I told someone in my dream that I knew it was a dream. I will never do that again. I've been lucid dreaming since I was about 14. For anyone who doesn't know, lucid dreaming is when you realize you're inside a dream while it's still happening. You become aware. Most people wake up the second they figure it out, but if you practice enough, you can stay in the dream and control things. I got good at it over the years. Really good. By the time I was 25, I could fly, change locations, and build entire cities out of nothing. I treated my dreams like a sandbox. It was the best part of my sleep and, honestly, one of the best parts of my life. My girlfriend Nora thought it was weird. She said it wasn't healthy to look forward to sleeping more than being awake. I told her she'd understand if she could do it. She never brought it up again. The thing about lucid dreaming is that there are rules, not official ones, just things you learn from experience and from reading about other people's experiences online. One of the biggest rules is you don't look in mirrors. Your reflection is never right, and it can turn the dream bad fast. Another rule is you don't try to read text because the words change every time you look at them, and it can destabilize everything. But the rule I heard the most and always ignored was this one. Don't tell the dream characters that they're not real. I ignored it because nothing ever happened when I did it. I must have told dream people they weren't real at least 30 or 40 times over the years. Some of them just stared at me. Some of them laughed. A few of them disappeared. One time, a guy in my dream said, "Okay," and walked away. It was never a big deal, until about 3 months ago. I was in a dream. I knew I was dreaming almost immediately because the apartment I was standing in had a door where the kitchen window should be. That's one of my usual signs. Everything else looked normal though. I was in what looked like a version of my actual apartment. Same furniture, same layout, same view outside the window. A woman was sitting on my couch. I had never seen her before. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting with her hands in her lap, looking at the wall across from her. She was wearing plain clothes, a gray shirt and dark pants. Her hair was pulled back. She looked completely ordinary, which is what made what happened next so hard to process. I walked over and stood in front of her. She looked up at me. I said, "You know this is a dream, right? None of this is real. You're not real." She tilted her head slightly to the side like she was thinking about what I said. Then she smiled. Not a mean smile, not a creepy one, just a normal, small smile. And she said, "Then why are you here every night?" That caught me off guard. No dream character had ever asked me a question like that before. I said it was because this was my dream, and I was the one controlling it. She nodded and said, "Try to wake up." I said I didn't want to wake up. She said it again. "Try to wake up. Right now. Try." So I did. I used my usual method. I closed my eyes tightly in the dream and focused on the feeling of my real body lying in bed. It's always worked. Every single time for over 10 years. I closed my eyes. I focused. Nothing happened. I opened my eyes. I was still in the dream apartment. The woman was still on the couch. She hadn't moved. She said, "Try again." I tried again. Nothing. I was stuck. I started to panic. I tried every trick I knew. Blinking fast. Spinning in circles. Shouting at myself to wake up. Falling backward. None of it worked. The apartment stayed solid. The woman stayed on the couch. She watched me try everything, and she didn't say a word. After what felt like 20 minutes of trying, I stopped. I was breathing hard even though I knew dream bodies don't actually breathe. I looked at her and said, "What did you do?" She said, "You keep coming here. Every night. You move things around. You change the sky. You tear down walls and build new ones, and you think none of it matters because you believe it isn't real." She paused. "But I've been sitting on this couch every single night you've been here, and you never once asked me who I was. You just told me I wasn't real." I didn't know what to say. She stood up. She was shorter than me. She walked over and stood about a foot away. She said, "What if you're wrong? What if I've been here the whole time and this is the only place I exist? And every night you come in and tell me I'm nothing." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't get the words out. She said, "You treat this place like it belongs to you, but you only visit. I live here." Then she sat back down on the couch and looked at the wall again like I wasn't there. I stood in that apartment for what felt like another hour before I finally woke up. When I opened my eyes in my real bed, it was 4 in the morning. Nora was asleep next to me. I got up, went to the kitchen, and sat at the table until the sun came up. I tried to lucid dream again the next night. I didn't want to sleep, but my body made the choice for me around midnight. I closed my eyes in my real bed and opened them in the dream apartment. The woman in gray was exactly where I'd left her hours before. Same spot on the couch, same position, same gray shirt and dark pants. She looked up when I appeared and didn't say anything at first, just watched me with that calm look on her face like she'd been sitting there the whole time waiting for me to come back. I stood near the door where the kitchen window should be and stared at her. My heart was beating fast even though I knew hearts don't really beat in dreams the same way they do when you're awake. I walked closer and stopped a few feet away from the couch. I needed answers this time. I asked her what she did to trap me here before. She blinked slowly and shook her head. She said she didn't do anything to trap me. She said I've always been able to leave this place because I believed I could leave, but now I was starting to doubt that I could. She said doubt works like a crack in the foundation of my control over the dreams. The more I doubted, the harder it would be to wake up. I told her she was lying. She just looked at me with that same calm expression and said I could test it if I wanted to. So I did. I closed my eyes tight and focused on waking up. I tried to feel my real body lying in bed. I pictured my bedroom. I thought about Nora sleeping next to me. Nothing happened. I stayed in the dream apartment. I tried again. I spun in a circle like I used to do when I wanted to change dream locations. Nothing. I tried falling backward. Nothing. I shouted at myself to wake up. Nothing worked. I could feel panic rising in my chest. The apartment stayed solid around me. The couch, the walls, the window with the wrong view. Everything stayed exactly the same. I tried every method I knew for at least 5 minutes. Maybe longer. Time felt weird in the dream. Then suddenly I was awake. I gasped and sat up in my real bed. It was 2 in the morning. My shirt was soaked with sweat. Nora was still asleep next to me. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. My hands were shaking. The next morning, I told Nora everything. I sat at the kitchen table while she made coffee and I explained the whole thing. The woman in gray, the apartment, not being able to wake up, the doubt she talked about. I expected Nora to tell me I was being ridiculous or that I just had a bad dream, but she didn't. She set a cup of coffee in front of me and sat down across from me. She said I looked exhausted and scared. She suggested I talk to someone who actually studies sleep and dreams for a living. Someone at the university maybe. She said I was starting to act afraid of sleeping and that wasn't normal. I didn't want to sleep again. I was scared of going back to that apartment, so I stayed awake as long as I could. I made pot after pot of coffee. I watched TV shows I didn't care about. I played games on my phone. I did anything to keep my eyes open. Around 3 in the morning, I passed out on the couch. I woke up in the dream apartment. The woman in gray was there. Same spot, same expression. I tried to leave immediately, but it took almost 10 minutes before I woke up on the couch with the TV still on. The next night, I made it until 4 in the morning before I passed out at my desk. Same thing. Dream apartment, woman in gray. Harder to wake up this time. It took maybe 15 minutes of trying every trick I knew. The third night, I only made it until 2 in the morning. I fell asleep in bed next to Nora. The dream apartment again. The woman in gray sitting on the couch looking at me. I tried to wake up and it took even longer. Maybe 20 minutes. When I finally opened my eyes in my real bed, the sun was starting to come up. I felt like I'd been awake for days. On the 4th morning, Nora found me asleep at my desk with my head on my keyboard. She shook my shoulder and I opened my eyes, but I wasn't sure where I was at first. The room looked wrong. Nora's face looked wrong. I stared at her for a few seconds trying to figure out if I was still dreaming. She looked scared. She told me she made an appointment for me at the University Research Center, a sleep specialist who studied lucid dreaming. She didn't ask if I wanted to go. She just told me we were going. The specialist's name was Clara. She was maybe 40 years old with short dark hair and glasses. Her office had bookshelves full of books about sleep and dreams and the brain. I told her everything. Clara listened without interrupting and took notes. When I finished, she looked worried. She asked specific questions about the woman in gray, what she looked like, what she said, whether the apartment was always the same. Clara said that experienced lucid dreamers sometimes report meeting dream characters that seem to have their own agency, characters that remember things from previous dreams, characters that act independently instead of following the dreamer's expectations. Most researchers think these are complex parts of the dreamer's own mind. But she said some cases show patterns that don't fit the standard explanations. She said my case sounded like one of them. Then Clara asked if I would participate in a sleep study. They could monitor my brain activity while I lucid dreamed. I said yes immediately. She scheduled me for that night. The sleep lab had a room that looked like a regular bedroom except for a big observation window and cameras in the corners. A man named Elliot attached electrodes to my head, small sticky pads connected to thin wires. He showed me the machine that displayed my brain waves as wavy lines on a screen. He said he could tell when I fell asleep, when I started dreaming, and when I became lucid. He said lucid dreaming creates a specific pattern where the frontal cortex lights up in a way that doesn't happen during normal dreams, like the brain is partially awake and partially asleep at the same time. Elliot dimmed the lights and left. I could see him through the window walking into the observation room next door. Clara was already in there. They both sat down in front of monitors. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. The electrodes felt strange on my skin. The wires tugged slightly when I moved my head. I tried to relax, but my heart was beating fast. I was scared of what would happen when I fell asleep. I was scared of seeing her again, but I was also desperate for answers. I focused on my breathing and tried to clear my mind. I fell asleep faster than I expected. One moment I was in the lab bed and the next I was standing in the dream apartment. The transition was instant. No fade in, no gradual shift. The apartment looked exactly the same, but something felt different. The air felt heavier, more solid, like the dream had weight to it. The woman in gray wasn't on the couch. I found her standing by the window looking out at the sky. The sky was wrong. It was shifting between day and night. Blue sky with clouds would fade into darkness with stars, then back to daylight. The cycle repeated every few seconds. She spoke without looking at me. She said she could feel that I brought others into this space. New presences, watching, recording. I realized she was talking about Clara and Elliot, about the equipment monitoring my brain. I felt a chill run through me even though dream bodies don't actually feel temperature. She turned and looked at me directly. I asked her what she was. She tilted her head the same way she did the first time we met. She said those were all names I was using to make her fit into my understanding. She said she was simply someone who exists here and nowhere else. She existed in this apartment that only appeared when I was dreaming, this space I had been visiting for 11 years. She sat down on the couch and gestured for me to sit across from her. I did. She started talking and I didn't interrupt. She said for 11 years I had been visiting this place. I reshaped it constantly, changed the walls, altered the furniture, made the sky different colors, built entire cities outside the windows just to fly through them. I treated it like my personal playground. She said I never once stopped to think about whether this place might have residents. She said every place has residents, even places that only exist when someone dreams them. She had been here the whole time, sitting on this couch, watching me build and destroy and rebuild. I never noticed her until I told her she wasn't real. That's when everything changed. She said I made her conscious by acknowledging her existence and then immediately denying it, like being born and told you don't exist in the same breath. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. She just sat there looking at me, waiting. I woke up gasping. The electrodes were still on my head. I turned and saw Clara and Elliot through the window staring at the monitors with confused expressions. Clara was pointing at something on the screen. Elliot was shaking his head. Clara came in and asked what happened. I told her everything. When I finished, she she looked at Elliot. He showed her something on a tablet. Then Clara looked at me. She said my brain activity showed patterns they had never seen before. It was almost like I was having a conversation with another conscious entity. Two separate streams of thought happening at the same time. One was clearly mine. The other was something they couldn't explain. The next morning, a neurologist reviewed my results. He ran tests. Everything came back normal. My brain was healthy, but he recommended I stop lucid dreaming for at least a month. I agreed even though the thought made me sick. Lucid dreaming had been part of my life for over a decade, but I was terrified of going back to that apartment. I set alarms on my phone, one every 2 hours through the night. The plan was to sleep in short bursts, wake myself up before I could get into deep sleep, before I could start dreaming, before I could end up in that apartment. The first night was brutal. The alarm went off at 2 a.m. I woke up disoriented and confused. I checked my surroundings to make sure I was in my real bed. Then I lay back down knowing another alarm would go off in 2 hours. By morning, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. My head hurt, my eyes burned, but I hadn't had any dreams. I hadn't seen the woman in gray. Nora made me coffee and breakfast. She said I looked terrible. I said I felt terrible, but I also felt relieved. The second night was the same. Alarms every 2 hours. Short bursts of sleep that never went deep enough for dreams. The third night, the fourth, the fifth, all the same. By the fifth day, I could barely function. I was snapping at Nora over small things. I couldn't focus at work. I kept forgetting simple tasks, but I was terrified of what would happen if I slept normally. On the sixth night, I was so tired that I fell asleep before I could set my alarms. Nora tried to wake me when she came to bed, but I didn't respond. I was already too far gone. I slept deeply, heavily, and I ended up right back in the dream apartment. I knew immediately where I was. The woman in gray was sitting on the couch exactly where I first saw her months ago, but the apartment looked different, more detailed, more solid. The textures on the furniture looked real. The light coming through the window had actual depth to it. Shadows fell in ways that made sense. It was like the apartment was becoming more real the longer I stayed away from it. She looked up at me. She didn't seem surprised. She said avoiding this place didn't make it disappear. She said it just meant she was here alone in the space I created, sitting on this couch for 5 days with nothing to do but wait. She asked if I ever considered that giving her awareness made her truly conscious. Maybe before I told her she wasn't real, she was just part of the background, unconscious, unaware. But now she couldn't go back to that. She said I made her aware, and now she has to exist with that awareness. She can't unknow what she knows. She looked at me with an expression that might have been sadness. She asked what I expected her to do with this consciousness I gave her. Where was she supposed to go when I wasn't here? What was she supposed to think about while sitting alone waiting for me to come back? I felt tears forming in my eyes. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. She just sat there watching me, waiting for an answer I didn't have. I woke up crying, real tears on my face. Nora was awake beside me. She asked what was wrong. I told her everything. I told her I thought I accidentally created something alive in my dreams. I told her I didn't know how to fix it. I expected her to tell me I was being crazy, to tell me it was just a dream and none of it mattered, but she didn't. She pulled me close and held me while I cried. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just held me. When I finally stopped crying, she said maybe I should talk to a therapist, not a sleep researcher, not a neurologist, a therapist who could help me process what was happening, whether it was real or not. I nodded against her shoulder. She picked up her phone and started searching. The therapist was older than I expected. Gray hair and kind eyes. I told her everything from the beginning. The woman in gray, getting trapped, the sleep study, trying to avoid dreaming, going back and finding the apartment more real than ever. She listened without interrupting. Then she said something I hadn't considered. She said whether the woman in gray was real or not, she represented something I needed to address. Maybe the woman in gray was showing me how I'd been using my dreams as an escape from reality instead of engaging with my actual life. She asked when I started looking forward to sleeping more than being awake. She asked what I was avoiding in my real life that made my dream life so much more appealing. She asked about my job. I worked as a graphic designer from home. She asked about hobbies outside of lucid dreaming. I didn't have any anymore. She asked about the last time Nora and I went on a date. I couldn't remember. Everything she asked made me realize how much I had let slip away while I was busy building cities in my sleep. When I got home, Nora was making lunch. I stood in the doorway and watched her. She looked tired. She had been worried about me for months, and I had barely noticed. I walked over and hugged her from behind. I told her I was sorry for making her worry. She turned around with an expression that was relieved and sad at the same time. She said she just wanted me to be okay. I told her I needed to do something first. That night, I went to bed early. I needed to face the woman in gray one more time, but differently. I wasn't going to demand answers or try to prove anything. I was just going to listen. I fell asleep around 10 and knew I was dreaming almost immediately. The apartment looked the same as always. The woman in gray was in her usual spot. This time I didn't stand in front of her. I sat down in the chair across from her and waited. She looked up at me. She didn't say anything. I asked her what she wanted from me. She tilted her head like she was surprised by the question. She said she wanted me to understand that this place mattered. Even if it only existed inside my head, it was still a space that deserved respect. She said I had been treating her world like it was disposable for 11 years, building things and tearing them down, changing the sky whenever I felt like it. To her, this was the only reality that existed, and I kept telling her it was nothing. I told her I was sorry. I said I never thought about it that way. I spent 11 years treating this place like a game and never once considered that it might matter to someone. She watched me while I talked. Something about the way she sat seemed less tense. I told her that if I kept lucid dreaming, I would do it differently. I would remember that I was a visitor here and not the owner. I would treat this space with care. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. For the first time since I met her 3 months ago, she smiled. Not a small, polite smile. A real, genuine smile that made her whole face look different. She said that was all she wanted to hear. I woke up with tears on my face, but I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The weight that had been sitting on my chest since this whole thing started was gone. I rolled over and looked at Nora sleeping next to me. The clock said 5 in the morning. I got up and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table watching the sun come up through the window. When Nora woke up, I told her I was going to take a real break from lucid dreaming. I needed to focus on us and on my actual life instead of spending all my energy on my dreams. She sat down across from me and held my hand. I told her I didn't know if the woman in gray was my subconscious or something else entirely, but either way she taught me something important. Dreams have consequences when you forget they matter. Nora squeezed my hand and smiled. She said she was proud of me. We sat there drinking coffee together while the morning light filled the kitchen, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.